For those complaining on most seasons that there's too many bowl games, you got your wish here in 2020. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the ACC side of things with Mike McDaniel. You can catch Mike at a variety of platforms: ESPN Blacksburg, Hokie Hangover, Sons of Saturday, and his basketball conference podcast as well. Mike, Merry Christmas. Belated Merry Christmas. How you doing tonight?
Merry Christmas, Mark. It only took a pandemic to cut down on bowl games, unfortunately. So, I guess so. That portion of the fan base will be satisfied, but all it took is once in 100-year pandemic. So,
yeah. Otherwise, we were just working toward everybody playing in a bowl game. We were just adding 2 and 3 every year, and we just wanted everybody involved. And the pandemic said, no, that's enough of that. So the pandemic, I guess, officially had enough authority and power to say too many bowl games.
Yes, and also, as we'll get into here in a moment, it also played a large part in who will be participating in those bowl games. I mean, usually you have guys opting out anyway, but I think that's even more so this year when you've had guys who have been tested 4 and 5 times a week all year long. I think guys got sick of that, obviously, playing in some of these bowl games. They've elected to instead opt out and, head to the NFL and work on improving their draft stock and getting ready for the next level. So I think we've seen more of that this year now as we sit here and preview these bowl games than we do ordinarily.
So even though sub 500 teams are welcome to the party, which is atypical, I know that there have been some 5 and 7 teams. Yes, don't correct me in the comment section below. We know the situation that has been in play for the past 5 years, depending on bowl slots. But generally, you need to have 6 wins to make a bowl game. But man, we got to a position where South Carolina was invited at 2 and 8. But Florida State, Boston College, and Pitt have all said no, thank you. Others as well. So we've got 6 ACC teams in play, starting with Miami, and probably one of the better matchups that should be an even matchup with a Big 12 participant, a couple top 25 teams meeting for the first time, a couple Power 5 teams, and the first top 25 matchup with Oklahoma State taking on Miami in the Cheez-It Bowl, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, ordinarily you look at a team like Oklahoma State, and they're a team that, under Mike Gundy historically has been really, really awesome offensively, and defensively they haven't been so good. They've been basically the epitome of the entire Big 12. And Mark, as paying attention to college football and looking closely at Big 12 schools, it's a little different this year for some of the Oklahoma schools, right? I mean, OU had a really nice defense under Alex Grinch. Oklahoma State's got a great defense as well. Offensively, it hasn't been quite as good, regardless of whether they've had Chuba Hubbard in the lineup or not. But he's opted out for this football game, so he won't be participating. Spencer Sanders has been kind of up and down for Oklahoma State all year, and the offense has just kind of been mediocre. They have a really, really good defense, but you're not used to saying that about Mike Gundy coach team on either side, where the defense is as good as it's been, and the offense is kind of the unit that's been a work in progress. But that's what it's been this year for Oklahoma State. On the flip side, Miami's got, some questions of their own. They had a bit of a lackluster defensive performance the last time we saw them. Miami was supposed to actually play their season finale last weekend, or I guess 2 weeks ago, against Georgia Tech. That game got postponed or I guess canceled ultimately. And the last time we really saw Miami was against North Carolina when they got blown out of the stadium, gave up 62 points, 776 yards of offense. That was a school record that they gave up defensively. So it really wasn't good. And now you couple that with the fact that Jalen Phillips and Quincy Roche, 2 of their best defensive players up front, are not going to be participating in this game. It adds an element of question, I guess, around Miami and whether or not they'll be able to slow down Oklahoma State's offense even without Chuba Hubbard. So it's an interesting matchup in that regard. And the thing I keep looking back to is, okay, D'Eriq King, if he makes enough plays in this football game, Miami should win. This is kind of a coin flip game. And when you look at coin flip games where the teams are pretty evenly matched on paper, what you have to go back to is, what star power can you see making a play or two that could end up deciding the ball game? And that's been what D'Eriq King has brought to Miami under Rhett Lashley and Manny Diaz. I mean, that's what he's been. He's added that element to the offense for Miami that's been missing in recent years. And even as Miami's defense has taken a bit of a step back overall this year, from the standpoint of they're not an elite unit that they've been in within the last 5 years, they've had outstanding defenses. They haven't been quite as good defensively this year. They've still been pretty good, but not nearly as good. And offensively, it's been De'Ara King, that quarterback that they've been missing for so long, and they finally have that, and he's made a huge difference for Miami this year. And I think a few plays here or there from De'Ara King could end up deciding the outcome of this football game. I like Miami to win this football game, Mark, just because of the questions of Oklahoma State's offense, and even with their defense, I still think that De'Ara King can make enough plays here to pull Miami in front and win this football game.
Yeah, ironically, Miami missing two of its best defensive players, as you note, in Roche and Phillips, who would close that defensive end position and contain Spencer Sanders, and Oklahoma State missing two of its best offensive players. Definitely its two best offensive players, maybe its two best players, period. You mentioned Chuba Hubbard, who has been the top rusher in the Big 12 for the past few seasons, Brace Hall this season, but overall over his career, and Tylan Wallace, a dynamic receiving threat for Oklahoma State, going to miss the game as well. Dylan Stoner, their top pass catcher, that's going to play with 37 catches. And you mentioned Spencer Sanders, a top-level high school recruit signed by Mike Gundy. Dynamic, can make big plays, but one of these guys that's going to make 5 or 6 plays a game that is going to make you go through the ceiling because they're so good, and then going to make you scratch your head because the very next play is going to give it away. 8 interceptions, 10 touchdown passes is not a good ratio, obviously. And Oklahoma State looked like for much of the season like the best team in the Big 12. And as you mentioned, the defense much better than what we have grown accustomed to seeing out of Stillwater. They played, I've seen them play Texas, Iowa State. They beat the Cyclones, who finished in first place during the regular season. Then they ran up against Oklahoma and got smashed by 4 touchdowns, and that proved that they were not the best in the Big 12. Oklahoma State and Miami should be an interesting one. And after what Miami experienced against North Carolina, this would be the test to prove, hey, yes, Clemson's way too good. Everybody else on the schedule was not up to our level. We're now facing another team on our tier, and we're ready this time for the challenge, because that North Carolina game was a complete debacle.